Everybody, I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Infrastructure Committee meeting of 19 July 2022. I declare this meeting open at 10:56 a.m. I'd like to advise attendees in the room that this meeting is being webcasted and audio recorded. There are some councillors just ducking up to grab jumpers because it's really, really cold in here, so we'll come back to the leave of absence, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you can deal with the leave of absence. You don't have to worry about acknowledging it.
Yep, so there's no leave of absences recorded for the meeting. There's just some people missing from it. So do I have a mover that there's no leave of absence? Councillor Murphy, seconded Councillor Wilcox. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's being carried unanimously by those in the room. Thank you very much. On to reports. Item 4.1, I'll now refer to item 4.1. Can the Manager of Water Service Performance, Mr Ben Steele, please enter the discussions, but before we open the discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I now refer to Mr Steele to open public discussion. Mr Steele, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, councillors. The purpose of this report, councillors, is in response to a GB item previously raised at this committee, just to provide a general overview of council's current concealed leak policy position in terms of eligibility criteria, different provisions, as well as looking across South East Queensland in terms of what other water service providers are offering. So there is a supporting presentation to this, councillor, so I'll just ask if we can put that up, please. Thank you very much. Just by way of context in terms of Logan Water's metering and customer support program, so annually we manually read just under 500,000 metres every year, so that's each metre in the city gets read 4 times a year by our meter reading contractor. We have an industry best practice error rate in that we have 99.8% of our reads are done accurately, and in terms of the number of metre reads skipped, we have a 99.82% rate, which we're really pleased about. We have a number of range of parameters that we use in our meter reading program to give indications of high reads, abnormal readings, which we use at the time of reading to indicate that we might need to engage with customers. So through our high consumption notification letters we send out periodically throughout the year, customers are notified where they might have a meter reading that's under or over what's previously been experienced at their property, all with the intent of trying to assist customers to manage their water consumption and to assess their internal plumbing. We have also then a fairly rigorous quality assurance program where we go out and read 40,000 metres manually through our own offices every year to double check the work of our contractors, and we make sure that every leak, potential leak, is investigated by one of our meter management officers on site. Just by way of context and background, so Logan City Council is a water service provider in South East Queensland, and we are required by the Water and Wastewater Code to have a concealed leak remission policy in place. That's about as detailed as the code goes in terms of what the policy is meant to contain, or the things that the policy needs to adhere to. It basically is in place for small customers to help manage the financial impacts of concealed leaks that they experience. In 2012, when Logan Water was re-established, our policy position at the time was fairly generous, so it offered a 50 to 70% remission of the entire bill that was lost at leak, so that included the bulk water component as well as the council component of the bill, and resulted in a fairly large financial outlay to council over the preceding years. In 2015, the council at the time triggered a review of the concealed leak policy, primarily driven by cost reduction to council, and at the time we were advocating really hard to the state to come to the table around their portion of concealed leak costs. So there was a view, and it's still shared by the industry, that if water service providers are required to have a policy for remissions, our belief is that the state should too. So 2015, which is our current policy position, is basically relaxed to only include counts a component of the concealed leak above and beyond historic average consumption, nice long words, and also to not include bulk water component and only includes owner-occupied, so tenanted properties, community title schemes, non-owner, not-for-profit and community groups who are excluded from the policy currently. In 2018, there was a position put to council to look at an insurance-based remissions option, which would look at distributing costs across the city. This wasn't pursued further at that point in time. It was really an investigatory process that other utilities were going through, and it hasn't widely been taken up in terms of concealed leak insurance across the industry. So again, our current position, and apologies that the table's fairly hard to see, it's in the report as well, details in the report, but you can see that from 2015 onwards, the change in policy has had its intended effect, which is to reduce our financial outlay for concealed leaks. I will note that this does not necessarily result in Logan City Council's policy being in kilter with our regional partners. So we would probably have the most stringent policy in South East Queensland as it relates to eligibility criteria for concealed leak remissions. Some other changes that were made at the time were that customers could only apply for a concealed leak once every 3 years, which was previously once every 12 months. And again, it only applied to residential owner-occupied properties from that point forward. So again, that's just a graphical representation of, you can see the change in impact. We probably do have, we don't have a really firm view of how many customers could have received or could have been eligible for a concealed leak remission over that time in terms of tenanted properties. Our application process basically cuts non-eligible customers off at the pass, so they don't actually make application stage. So it's really difficult for Logan Water to quantify the total number of applications over that period of time that could have been eligible for a concealed leak remission. Just in terms of breakdown, so currently there's about 64% of the city's connected properties that are eligible for a remission under the current policy. 32% are ineligible, which is our residential non-owner occupied properties, and specifically speaking to community title schemes, we have about 1,300 community title schemes throughout the city, and the complexities around community title schemes are based on whether or not they're pre-2008 or post-2008, and that's driven by the plumbing code. So any properties pre-2008 have got three options. We either bill the body corporate directly, who then apportions the bill based on their own title lot, or we go into a body corporate agreement with the community title scheme, where Logan Water can either bill the body corporate directly for all of the consumption, or we'll enter into an agreement to read all of their sub-meters and then bill the sub-meters directly. But any residual usage that's on common property would be the responsibility of the body corporate for payment. And anything post-2008, it's mandatory for all of those community title schemes to be sub-metered, so we have direct billing relationships with those sub-metered customers. But in the event of a leak on a common property area, the body corporate would be responsible for the cost of the leak, and currently under our existing policy is not eligible for a remission. So I think, broadly, Logan Water recognises that our concealed leak remission policy is probably not in line or not aligned to the offerings of other South East Queensland water service providers. It is an administrative plan for Logan Water to do a review of our policy by the end of the second quarter this financial year, and that was really driven by the fact that our 2015 policy is not plain English, so it's really difficult for customers to understand what they're entitled to or not entitled to. Looking to engage some level of consultation around any changes to the policy, and then obviously looking to assess the expansion of policy provisions and eligibility criteria based on community title schemes, not-for-profits, community groups, and also doing some assessment on the tenanted properties and what impact that would have to council from a cost perspective. So that's kind of the end of my overview of the report. Councillor, Madam Chair, back to you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I just want to say thank you so much for bringing this report up, because it came about as a result of inquiries from people in my community. Look, I think it was a great report. It was very, very with really insight, interesting to see what was happening around the rest of South East Queensland, and I appreciate the work you're planning to do in the lead up to making some other decisions in the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mayor Power.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All sounds good in theory until, of course, that little old lady or the family in need with their children in hospital and all the worst things you can imagine, and it's a media story. Of course, these things always happen. Not a great fan of this policy because there's always scenarios that leave us a little bit vulnerable to bad media, and sometimes I wonder whether the money we're saving is worth the pain. I want to ask a couple of questions regarding the non-owner. Do we actually contact them, the actual owner of the property?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, Mr Mayor, the high notice goes to the property owner, so the high water consumption notice actually goes to the property owner because our relationship is with the property owner.
And the question is, do we actually continue to try and talk to them, or do we just send something and hope it gets to them?
Yeah, look, through you, Madam Chair, we do send high water consumption notices to all properties, and where we have repeated evidence of that continued high water consumption is evident there. So when our meter readers go out after issuing those notices, they will contact the property. If someone's home, they'll knock on the door, they'll leave cards, they'll try to intervene as much as proactively possible.
And in the case of a major leak, do we take evasive action in turning their water off?
Through you, Madam Chair, under the code, we're actually prevented from turning water off. So as a water service provider, it's actually illegal for Logan Water to restrict or turn off water supply as it's an essential service. And the challenge that we have at the moment is that our meter reading cycle is generally once every 90 to 100 days. So by the time our meter readers get to the meter, we don't have any indication of how long that leak may have been occurring for. But
even under strict water restrictions?
Even under strict water restrictions, yes, through you, Madam Chair.
I'm just wondering to revisit that, because if I was a property owner and I had a severe leak and for some reason or another, I was contacted by the council but it never actually got through, the amount of water that goes through would basically financially crush some families, and I'm just obviously conscious of the fact that the amount of water that can flow through some of these pipes can severely damage a family's financial situation, and that's what I'm concerned about, is that we've got infrastructure that's under the ground, no one can see. I know it's the responsibility of the property owner, but for all intents and purposes, the ground can move and all sorts of stuff can happen. And next minute, they've got to sell their house to pay the council water bill. And I'm just thinking whether we should install an evasive action plan that if we know that there is a severe leak somewhere, that we take another step in alerting the resident of the actual leak.
Through you, Madam Chair, happy to take that on notice and come back to Council and what that might look like. I think further to the Mayor's point, Logan Water does do a lot of proactive engagement and communications. It's the age-old challenge of, yes, the infrastructure, private infrastructure is property owners' responsibility, and we do attempt to proactively engage and communicate with our customers around checking meter readings regularly, but yeah, definitely happy to take that request on notice.
Just for the Mayor's information, Logan Water approached a unit complex in Ewing Road in Woodridge about their high water use for one of the quarters. They knocked on all of the doors, and as it turns out, the new water meters didn't actually work quite so well with their internal infrastructure, and something had burst or had damage done to it. And they kept knocking on doors until they got to everybody to check their water pressures and to do that sort of thing. So they actually saved probably a lot of vulnerable people in my community a fair bit of money, which was great, but I get what the Mayor's saying for sure. Councillor Raven?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to echo your sentiment that Logan Water do a great job of doing their best to keep people informed. And usually when there is an excess water charge, they'll go out, they'll investigate, they'll communicate with the residents. So my concerns about this report just being received has nothing to do with Logan Water's performance, but with the decisions made in 2015 then 2018 not to do anything for our residents when they have a concealed leak. From my memory, and sorry, Councillor Bradley, I can't remember what your position was on this, but I remember the Mayor and I in 2018 fighting very hard that we thought that the insurance option should be investigated because...
Sorry, could you clarify if it was the then Mayor or the current Mayor?
The current Mayor. We argued very hard to that for a reasonably small cost on everybody's water bill, everybody would be insured in the city. So I think it was $5 a year, Ben, off the top of my head. Probably more now anyway. Yeah, it was minuscule in the context of an annual water bill. And that would have meant that whenever you had a concealed leak, as long as you had taken steps to fix it as soon as it was brought to your attention, so you can't just ignore the leak, that insurance policy would have protected people. And at cost to the user, which is usually how we like to do it, isn't that right, Mr. Director? We'd like to charge people for the service that they get, and getting that insurance just seemed to make good sense to me at the time. I understand that it's not really done industry-wide, but that said, we're also got the harshest and least forgiving policy industry-wide. So we're not in line with industry now as it is. I'd like to see the option of that insurance being brought back to us for the next budget. So, because that's where it got considered last time from memory, being brought back to the next budget for special consideration so that we could look at whether or not what the impact would be now, because obviously the insurance costs will be different. And I'm happy to put that to the motion, although if Ben's writing things down, so he might just be happy to bring.
I was about to say, is this a separate GB item for the purpose of this, or?
Well, the report just says to be received, so I'm happy to amend this motion so that, we receive the report and ask that the option of insurance be brought forward to a future budgets register. Because this council is very different to the last council, and I would like to see the new councillors have the opportunity to consider that option and whether or not it's worth it for the city.
So Councillor Raven is proposing to amend a motion to read...
And I'm proposing to second that motion.
Just hold up there, big fella, hold up there.
We just got the girls have the training wheels on, so we just give them a sec to catch up.
To ask a question? Yeah. Just when the time comes, sorry. Councillor Bradley, would you like to ask your question now?
Thank you. I'm just curious, how many community title scheme properties are there in the city?
So there's just over 1,340 from recollection, Councillor, through you, Madam Chair, CTS properties in the city. Many are predate 2008, so there's a broad number of schemes in place. So some have sub-meters, some just manage their body corporate to bill them separately and directly. So there's 1,340 in the city.
I know there's a number in the area I represent. This might be a general business question, so please, Chair, tell me if I bring it up in GB or not. I'm just wondering, with all the rain that we've had this year, have you had an increase in people reporting water leakages? Because I know in the area I represent, there's a lot of natural springs that pop up with a lot of water, so a lot of rain. So I'm just curious if you have had an increase.
Through you, Madam Chair, just clarity, Councillor, that's just number of leaks across the network, or is that number of concealed water leaks on properties? Concealed water, yeah. So we've actually had, just by way, so last financial year by concealed leaks, we had a total number of 459 applications received. At the end of this financial year, we had 287 applications received. So, and again, they differentiate in value and kilolitres lost. So the average remission last year.
Sorry, through the chair, that's not really my question. Have you had an increase in people complaining of water leaks?
Yeah. Through the chair, it's a figure we don't currently have at the moment, but I'm happy to pursue the data and get a verified figure for the numbers for the 21-2 financial year.
Thanks very much. So there's two things that we've got to do. The materials within the PowerPoint changed since the distribution of the agendas, so we must table the updated PowerPoint to the meeting. This is a procedural motion, so I need a mover for that. Councillor Stemp, thank you very much. Can I have a show of hands? The amended motion?
So you want a GB?
Is your hand up?
What do you ask me to vote
The procedural motion
Oh, yeah.
to update the PowerPoint.
My hand is up.
Thank you very much for your hands up. That's been carried unanimously. We'll just wait for the ladies. Just one moment. It would have been far easier to receive the report and then do a GB, but let's just go this way. So there is an amendment to the motion, the original motion. It reads that the report of the Manager Water Service performance be received, that the concealed leak insurance be referred to a future budget register for consideration. The concealed leak insurance proposal? Or?
Yeah, we could call it proposal, and the word "the" is repeated twice at the start of
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
The first one should be that.
Yeah, that, the concealed leak insurance proposal. Sorry, thank you. I'm just asking Ben if he's comfortable with that recommendation.
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor, I wonder if there's an opportunity to have the insurance presented as part of a range of policy options for council. So it was our intent to bring back a revised policy anyway. We can definitely make sure that insurance is part of that policy review and bring a number of options back to council, if that suits.
Yeah. Are you changing something else?
Ben just had a suggestion.
This would have been so much easier to receive the report and then bring up a GB.
That the concealed leak, that the concealed leak insurance proposal be considered as part of a policy review.
Deb.
Lisa.
What sort of like?
Mr Steele, from the chair,
Madam Chair.
the Division 5 councillor has a question.
Ben, that the concealed leak insurance proposal be considered as part of a broader policy review to be brought to a future City Infrastructure Committee meeting.
Thank you,
Happy
Madam
with
Chair.
that.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, there is a motion on the board that the report of the Manager Water Service performance dated 19 July be received, that the concealed leak insurance proposal be considered as part of a broader policy review to be brought to a future City Infrastructure Committee. Councillor Ravens moved the motion. Are you seconding it, Councillor Bradley? Thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's been carried unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair.
It's the last time. No, I'm just kidding. So we're moving on to item 4.2, water remission considerations for flood impacted customers. I'll now refer to item 4.2. Before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, Mr Steele, could you open public discussion?
Madam Chair, do you mind if I introduce it and then throw to Mr Steele to continue the discussion?
I'm curtsying at the thought of it. Thank you.
Just to give some background, councillors had requested that we bring back a report in regards to water remissions for properties that were impacted by the flood event in some way that were not necessarily picked up with this council decision to provide a rate rebate. As you're aware, about 289 properties were flooded above floor level, and council made a decision to provide a $250 flood rebate to those properties. However, there were a number of other properties in the order of 300 or more that we're aware of that had water impact on their property in some way, but was not over floor level. We've had a number of those properties challenged the rebate, and about 27 properties that came back and asked for whether they were eligible, and they weren't under that current council decision. And I'm aware of a handful of other people that have requested a water rebate because they use their own water to wash out parts of their property. The complication is obviously that at the same time Queensland Fire and Emergency Services and some volunteers were also running around, the RFF were running around rural fireys, as well as a private individual was running around doing washouts using hydrants, and so they're not picked up in water usage from individual properties. So that's the background to why this report is here, and we're happy, Ben is here, happy to obviously take any questions. It's a short report, so we'll consider it as read and happy to take any questions from there.
So on that basis, am I going to Ben for his report, or are you going to repeat that, Ben? Use what questions, Ben?
Happy to take it as read through you, Madam Chair, and take questions.
Thanks very much. Councillor Raven first off the bat, followed by Councillor Power, Bradley and myself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ben, am I right in my reading of the report that other service providers are providing a small remission for properties that only had water on the property, not above the floor level?
Through you, Madam Chair, Council, for clarification, so Urban Utilities and Unity Water both offered a remission in line with their owner council's flood rebate position. So where Brisbane City Council, for example, gave a flood remission to a property that met eligibility criteria, Urban Utilities then also met that criteria and provided $50 rebate.
Great. And I recall during when the crisis was afoot and we were rightly moving quickly to support our residents with flood with a flood recovery package, that we wanted to get the support and the funding out to the community as quickly as possible through a special council meeting. And so my criticism isn't of the existing framework, but I would like to see that we at least do what our competitor water providers, utility providers, are doing. I've had a number of residents contact me who are deeply disappointed and dismayed that even though they knew that they could wait for an unknown amount of time for the fire service to get there. They desperately wanted to get their properties clean because they know that time is of the essence. When the mud is hardening, you can't wait 3 or 4 days for it to bake in the sun. You've got to get in there and wash it out. Some of them use their water to help other people wash their properties out, and all they ask is a little bit of compassion from the organisation, from council, I should say, to provide a token gesture that reflects some of the costs that they incurred in trying to clean their properties and get it, or their neighbours' properties, and get it back to business as usual. As we all know, when a flood happens, all people want to do is get back to normal as quickly as possible. And I think if you went out to the community and asked them, would you see it as fair and appropriate to make a tiny contribution out of the $1 billion budget of this city to support residents who are flood impacted with water on their properties, they would say yes. So now that we've got this report come forward, I would love the opportunity to understand if there's been 300 and it's $50 a hit, what's that, $1,500, Sylvia? Is that roughly what we're looking at? Assuming we could get some more on the back of that. 15,000, thank you, 15,000. Ben, do we have any idea how many properties had water on them?
Through you, Madam Chair, we rely on the data that's generally collected by Council's disaster management team to assess these incidents as they occur. And as the report outlines, it's really, really difficult to quantify the water usage that's related specifically to cleanup. So citywide, we actually had a reduction in water consumption over that same period. And even if you know, going back to the ex-tropical cyclone Debbie event, you look at those really significantly impacted properties, and it was really hard to assess based on average consumption what the value of the consumption was for cleanup. So I think this is why the $250 general rebate flood remission is appropriate for council, because we're in the position where we have both our rates and water on the one account, where Unity and Urban Utilities bill for their water separately, so they have to give a rebate through their own pockets. So, but yeah, we don't generally have an idea about the extent of water on properties and then the extent of cleanup.
I think it'd be worth and I understand that would have to come from a budget somewhere, that it is obviously ratepayers' money. It'd be worth considering a budget amendment to have a set amount set aside for people who are making these claims. If it does get that way, it can't go above an unreasonable amount. We might, I don't want to suggest a number, but at least 15,000, maybe slightly more. And that way, if we do get a lot more applications and it hits that number, council can reconsider how far it wants to go.
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, the decision was obviously in response to the flood, and it was made on the run to some degree. And I think, you know, we have to be flexible and be able to do these things. I'm not sure whether we would continue the same line of address. I'm thinking that we call it a hardship case or a hardship grant, and when we apply it to water, I think, you know, there's an issue where, as you say, Fire Brigade come in and, you know, they basically use the hydrant water and there's no charge. But we've got to accept the reality that these people have been inundated with water and there'd be a hardship charge, and in a lot of cases the houses can't be occupied for some time, and I think we should apply it to a hardship charge, not water consumption assistance or that sort of thing. The thing that concerns me is there was a number of people rejected because they were inundated with sewage, not water. Now, I think that sewage is more important to remove than water. I think these people must be assisted. And I think what we should do in future is consideration being a hardship charge and apply to sewage and water inundation. And it doesn't sort of apply to how much water you use, but the fact that we're helping these people who have obviously got an uphill battle to get back into their homes, and they may have to go to emergency accommodation, and obviously some of them can't afford or can't get insurance. And I just think applying it to water consumption is not probably appropriate.
Mr Steele.
Through you, Madam Chair, to address your point, Mr Mayor, Logan Water does have a sewer inundation policy, and it was activated during that event specifically. We had a number of properties who were inundated by sewer, and our policy covers temporary relocation of those residents. Also, it covers the cleaning costs and any rectification costs to get the properties back to a state where customers can return to their homes safely. So we definitely do use and rely on our current sewer inundation policy for those purposes.
Well, I'm just wondering why we got those complaints, if that was the case, in Caesar Street particularly.
Brutus and Caesar Street had sewage inundation, Mary Street had sewage inundation.
So I think that concern came where in the major event, a sewer manhole, in the case of Brutus Street, was blown off because of the amount of stormwater in the system. Now, at that point in time, and the river was high, so any water that was in the sewer network was mixing with the floodwaters. The floodwaters went onto property, and that's why people are complaining that they may have had sewer in the floodwaters. But if you take that to its full extent, there could have been sewer in floodwaters throughout the whole city. And it is highly diluted. At that point in time, when our network overflows, it is highly diluted. So those couple of instances were where property, land, was flooded, and that may have contained an element of sewage. It was different to the policy specifically deals where a sewer overflow occurs in the house, and it means that the residents have to vacate their house while we go in and clean up their house. So they're two different scenarios.
I just want to come back on that because I understand what you're saying, and but I think there needs to be some flexibility. If it's not diluted, then it's a smell issue, and it's obviously a health issue. So I think that we should address them as the same, and I understand that they may not have been inundated in their house with that water, but to have sewage in and around the house is not acceptable, and I think that we should change the policy or broaden the situation where we allow for a hardship grant to go to these people as well, because I'm sorry, but it's unacceptable that sewage manhole is taken out by a flood and we're not responsible in any way. I just can't accept that.
Mr Mayor, just to add to that, in the case of Brutus Street and Caesar Street, there were houses that were built in the early 50s that have a separate laundry that is located on the ground level, while the house is about 3 feet above ground level. So they didn't qualify for water over the floorboard inundation, but they most certainly were impacted, losing their washing machine and dryer to diluted sewage coming into their yard, and they're not eligible for any of these payments. So is that correct? They're not eligible under this proposal?
Correct, Madam Chair.
We need to amend the proposal, quite frankly, because this is the reason why we raised this. Brutus Street, Caesar Street and Mary Street copped a flogging when it came to that those sewage inundations. They didn't just get it once, they got it multiple times. So there was one particular home that wasn't eligible for over-the-floor payments under the disaster guidelines, and they feel very aggrieved as long-paying ratepayers in Logan that they were left behind. So. Mr Steele, do you have anything to add? Councillor Raven, sorry.
So
is this on my comment, or because Councillor Bradley was next? Councillor Bradley?
Thank you. Through the chair. I'm just curious, Silvio, with your statement at the start, you referred to being a number of people challenging. Whereabouts did they come from, the people that challenged?
Oh, they were throughout the year, the council, but they were generally in the lower reaches of the river. They were in, so as I said, we estimate that, you know, over somewhere in the order of 3,000 properties may have had water on their property. About 600 we've got on a database that had water that in some sort of building, a shed, garage or the house. Out of that 300, only 600, sorry, out of that only 289 around that actually were identified and confirmed as water over floor level. And that's by physical inspection. When council made that decision, the notice went out, the media went out about that decision, we automatically incorporated the $250 rebate on those 289 properties. Anyone that didn't get that then came to council, and we had about 27 extra people that came to council asking why they were eligible. And we assessed those 27 by doing a physical inspection of those 27 properties and identified they weren't. But some of them would have been eligible if council is prepared to broaden this $50, whatever rebate they consider here, for, water just on their property, or use of water, or, whatever they want to rebate. Now, I just caution councillors, whatever decision you make here, you have to be clear on what conditions you want me to put on it, because when people don't get the rebate, they come to someone. And unfortunately, I was left with that decision making of doing the inspections and making that decision. So just please give me the conditions you'd like to incorporate so that we can be clear about who's going to be eligible for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know of some properties in the area I represent that have water inside. I'm just curious if you actually physically went out to any of those.
I'd have to check I'd have to check the list of 27 properties.
So it was only the 27 properties that you went out to?
That's after the 289. So we've got the list of 289 and we've got the list of 27 extra people that asked for a rebate.
Is it possible to get that information of if any of those 289 were in Rochdale South or Springwood?
Yeah, I thought we'd actually shared that previously with councillors, but I'm happy to
Thank
go
you,
back.
I appreciate that.
Councillor Bannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things to point out. One is that the RFS obviously go to non-rural properties to help wash out houses. So I'd like to make note of that, not just rural, non-rural. The second one is the other part that you got is a lot of my properties that got flooded weren't on water. So obviously your tank's full from a flood, but you'll drop 10,000 litres easily cleaning out a house. Fill 10,000 litres is anywhere from $250 to $350 for a truck. So these guys would be exempt from getting anything. I know $50 if you're on town water, but the majority is probably Laurie be the same, I'm guessing, and Jacob have a fair few. They're rural properties on tank water. They drop a whole tank load of water. So how do you look after both is a hard question. We can't forget us rural people.
Mr. Steele, you can't forget the rural people. I'm just... How did that come off? No, just kidding. So this is actually about addressing those people that aren't, that are connected to the water system, that actually use water in the flood to clean out their properties. Water over the floorboards is one rule, but given we have some properties that actually have, under the same roof line, an external laundry where they may have been inundated, I think we seriously need to look at those. When you have 5 people in a street and one house in the middle that is 3 feet off the ground doesn't qualify, but has part of their house on the ground, we need to look at that. So I'll take the lead from councillors. There's a motion that's... No, sorry, Councillor Raven, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Sylvia, what's the best way forward to give you the parameters for consideration? Because receiving the report doesn't cut the mustard.
No, I appreciate that we put a report here because the difficulty in actually assessing what people will and won't get and which people will or won't get a submission was always going to be difficult. It's always going to be administratively difficult. So unless and to put a condition on it is what we struggle with. We struggle with actually trying to identify a condition which is suitable and also the dollar value linked to water usage. So, you've asked us to link this to water usage. So I'm not sure, have you got anything?
Yeah, and through you, Madam Chair, probably to Councillor Bannon's point as well, this is why during these disastrous events, water consumption is not necessarily the most equitable mechanism to offer, to investigate and offer those things, which is why Council previously has gone for general rate rebates in these instances, because it covers all properties across the city, whether they're connected to water or not connected to water. I'd be happy to look at that, but I don't think that my advice is that water consumption's not the most appropriate mechanism to look at this rebate program.
Mr Mayor?
Yeah, I concur, and that's why I've brought up the hardship grants, because if you look at what Brisbane did, it's a hardship grant, and I think we have an overriding policy regarding the water usage. I think what we should do is condition it not for a lump sum of $250, but actually reduce to the average medium. So, for instance, if a family use 280 litres and on average they use, kilolitres, and they normally use 200, then we refund that 80, but we have a separate area for hardship money, in particular when our houses can't be lived in. That is a situation where Brisbane identified, and their grant is bigger, but because people aren't living in those houses because of the flood, surely we shouldn't be hitting them up for rates over that period of time. Now, what I'm saying is you cap that to a hardship grant, not obviously the amount of time it's not livable, but to allow for the fact that these people aren't living in those properties. So we would identify two separate areas, one for the water consumption and two, money available for hardship grants.
All right.
I think they're very different issues, Director. And then Councillor Raven.
So, like I said, trying to link it, and Ben's reaffirmed, trying to link it to water consumption, I think is almost impossible. It just creates an administrative burden for us trying to assess and manage that. We have to do an inspection every time, we have to look at meters, we have to do all sorts of things. A possible solution or a possible option here is for Council to make a decision that extends the $250 rebate previously provided for houses that were inundated over floor level to other properties impacted by the flood event, which can, which can confirm a hardship impact. So that would, in that, there's, like I said, there's 27 27 that I know that applied, that you'd say, all right, well, they have shown us some level of impact. If that gets extended to another 20, another 100, you're up under that 15,000. I wouldn't be going to the total 300 properties. It's still a burden for us to do an assessment, but at least picks up these 30 odd that applied last time, that showed that they had some impact, but that could extend further. I think it would pick up all the ones, I'm not sure, but it would pick up the ones that you've referenced in your discussion, and Councillor Raven referenced earlier. It might pick up those ones.
And this is not about the big shed out the back. This is actually about inundation in living space that actually is under the one roof. It's not about... Is that what the purpose of Councillor Raven?
No. So my intention through raising this on behalf of my residents is that they had to either clean out sheds where that they have a lot of like their gear, their equipment, their possessions in. It may be parts of their home that they would consider living spaces. So it's not just for people who have a laundry under their house, not that limited. It's anyone who had flood impact that couldn't just let the rain sort it out because it was in the back of a property near a river or something like that. Like, it was actually infrastructure on their property that got damaged or that had to be cleaned. I don't know about the $250, but and I certainly don't know what the mayor, I haven't considered what the mayor's talking about, which is in relation to providing rates relief for people who can't live in their houses while they're getting repaired. That's a different matter entirely. What I'm talking about, though, is surely if urban utilities have some way of determining whether or not they give a $50 rebate, we could just use that as a starting point for that qualification.
For clarity, through you, Madam Chair, so the urban utilities and Unity Water rebates were in alignment with their owner council's flood rebates.
Okay. So we're one step up.
So Logan City Council's $250 rebate was inclusive of cost of water as well. So whereas I'm not sure what Brisbane City Council or other councils' flood rebates were or their eligibility criteria.
So the question Silvio was asking was, what criteria do you want to apply? And essentially, your suggestion, Silvio, was a pretty broad one. Can you demonstrate that you were flood impacted and had some hardship from that? That's going to be pretty intensive for you to administer. It'll certainly cost you more than $250 per property to administer that sort of a criteria, because it's going to be so subjective and open to challenge and AACs and ombudsmen. I think it would be simpler, wouldn't it, to have some kind of criteria, and other councils have done it. We're not inventing the wheel here.
No. I think what Ben's explaining is all Brisbane did was link it to the original decision of a rebate. So we've got a decision of rebate that 289 properties were impacted by flood over floorboards.
Yep.
That's all Brisbane did. They linked the $50 rebate, which is a water business rebate, not their rebate, to that rebate. I can do that, but I'm only going to pick up 289 properties.
That's not how I read the report, and that's why I clarified with my first question.
But that's what Ben's saying. Brisbane had a policy for rebates, and all the water utility did was give an extra $50 from their water bill to those same properties. Not to additional properties, to the same properties.
Great, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. That was what I was trying to ask with my very first question, to clarify that they were giving a $50 remission beyond people that had water over the floorboards.
So, given the sentiment and confusion surrounding this, are we asking for it to proceed, or are we asking for it to go back for more consultation with councillors?
Well, what I'm asking the director is to provide us a way forward. It sounds like councillors want to consider it, but they would need to know what the criteria is and how much it'll cost. That's essentially where it's coming from, which is kind of what I was hoping the report would do, but didn't get there.
Councillor Hall.
I'm a little confused about the disparity between, a house that's been flood inundated, so there's actually, water inside the house, and a property that's been flood impacted, because just about all properties were flood impacted in some way or another from the rain coming down. It's very different scenario when water's actually inside the dwelling area of a house than when it's just sitting in the backyard and it may have gone over your garage or whatever. I think the circumstances under assessing which properties would be applicable for this would be all over the place, because how would you tell? I could basically drive my mower into floodwater and then back it back out and just say, look, my garage went under. You can tell because my mower's wet. So I think we're heading into an area where things are starting to look very grey. At least now, it's clear cut. It's the properties that the water has gone inside the house. That's the ones that get the rebate. I think we're going to start confusing it, and we're going to have a lot of claims which may not necessarily be applicable to this. So I think we need to be very careful on this.
Councillor Bannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's as clear as mud. $50 isn't going to help anyone. It doesn't help hardly at all. And the Mayor will tell you, it's hard on the staff, because if you have had a flood event and you're going through the stress and the trauma of having your house flooded, it's hard for staff to rock up and say, now prove to me how your house got flooded. You probably get your head bitten off. It's not clear at all, because the $50 won't really help because it's $50. It doesn't help with rural properties. I think we need to go away and just give Silvio and the staff more time. I'd like to just if you're flood affected, take it off your rates, but that's another argument. But this isn't clear. I'm lost in the whole thing, and I don't think $50. To me, if I've had a flood event through my house, and someone from staff says, "Prove to me you had a flood event," I'm going to lose it, and all of that just to get $50. It's not going to achieve anything.
All righty. We seem to be... We're not moving anywhere. So can Councillor Raven?
Sorry, Madam Chair. So I asked the Director a question and then you went to Councillor Hall and Councillor Bennett. So back to the Director. How do we move forward from this? He is the expert. He is the man. How do we move forward? So how do we consider options? How do we get to the next step? No other comments from councillors until Silvio answers, please.
All right. Well, I'm not an expert on political decisions, so that's why you're here. My advice, and that's why the report doesn't have a recommendation, is that trying to extend the rebate policy to pick up all these extra scenarios is not simple, and we shouldn't link it to water. That's what I think the conclusion is here. If you want us to now go away and assess if I can extend the rebate and what conditions I would put on that, you will need to ask me to do a report, because it will take me some time to consider how to extend it without creating an absolute administrative nightmare.
That's exactly the answer I was looking for. Thank you very much, Sylvia. See, you are an expert. So don't talk yourself down, mate. So what recommendation do we need to give you to do that? Sorry.
Yeah, so I think the recommendation would be that the Director of Road and Water Infrastructure be requested to bring back a report to a future Road and Water Infrastructure, City Infrastructure Committee in regards to the potential options for extending a rates remission to properties impacted by the March flood event. You get all that?
And you're going to pop behind them and rework that. Thank you very much. We're just going to take a minute.
End of February, was it? Sorry.
Everything covers it for me? So it's the will of the people? You could drown under the weight of it. No, because it's just so easy. Tony woke up. It did not. Your mic's not on. Chair, I'm very important.
I read my committees last week.
I was going to say Crimea River, but that's just too dangerous.
February/March.
There you go, man.
But you finished on March the 4th.
That's right. It was about 30th of February, wasn't it? 31st.
No, the peak happened on the 2nd and 3rd of March, because I got married on the 4th.
Oh, that's right. It did too. You were off up the Tamarind Mountain. That's it. You'll always remember that now.
Exact date of the flight. I was trying to negotiate a couple of them to get back. Never again.
Well, hopefully you won't have to get married again.
I know. That's what they're doing.
I'll bring this back. I'll bring this back around budget time next year.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I'll try and get you back something. But it's a night. Yeah, maybe under the main roof. Yeah, because a lot of these 30 were Queensland ISETs that they've had similar. Had a barbecue, not barbecue, laundry bar.
Okay, so there's a amended motion on the board that the report of the Manager Water Service Performance dated 19 July be received, that the Director of Road and Water Infrastructure be requested to prepare a report to a City Future Infrastructure Committee meeting providing options for extending the rates for emission relief to properties that were not eligible.
But impacted.
Possible option rather than...
Providing possible options? Well, they're options.
It's just options.
They're options.
Just here. But word PUT, but
Properties.
impacted by the February March.
However. Not but.
Is it? However, all right. However, where did they say?
When you say but, it excludes everything before.
Does it? All right, that,
However.
yeah, use that word instead of but, however.
Sorry, that's linguistics.
I will back you on your question.
Sorry?
It's linguistics.
Linguistics.
There's a motion on the board. Do I have a mover for the motion, please? Councillor Raven, a seconder for the motion. Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I note that that has been carried unanimously by everybody in the room, excluding Councillor Hall. Councillor Hall?
Abstain.
Thank you very much. Okay, that was great. Thank you so much, gentlemen. That was really appreciated.
Any GB for them?
Any GB for water? Hopefully not. Thank you. Have a great day. Item 5.1 is Capital Road and Drainage Infrastructure Delivery Program. I'll now refer to item 5.1. Can the Road and Infrastructure Delivery Manager, Mr. Darryl Riley, please enter discussions? Before we open discussions on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none. I note that item 5.1 is a confidential item. It is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as it contains information about proposed changes to organisational structure. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item? And if applicable, provide an overview of your intended discussions if it's different to the prepared motion. Councillor Bradley has moved that we move into confidential. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Raven, all those in favour, please raise your hands. Mr Mayor, are you not support? Yep, okay, just checking. That's been carried with the exception of Councillors Hall and Heremiah. Councillor Hall?
Against.
Councillor Heremiah?
Against.
Thank you very much. So, got to turn my page over. Give me 2 seconds. The motion is carried. The meeting is now closed to the public. Please be advised the meeting is now in confidential session and therefore the recording of I note that the associated confidential report was distributed to councillors separately and therefore it is required to be tabled to the meeting. Is there a mover for the motion to table the confidential report as displayed on the screen? Councillor Bannon, seconded Councillor Fraser. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously by the attendees in the room.
Yep. Done the whole lot.
Does anyone wish to speak to the motion on tabling the document? No, there's not. That's great. That motion actually was carried.
Yeah, so we combined them, I think, in the end.
So now I've got a call for someone to move the report's motion. Thank you very much, Councillor Bannon. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Bradley, all those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. The motion has been carried with no exceptions. That's the end of the Road Infrastructure Delivery Manager's reports. Is there any general business for him? Is there any business for us, Mr Manager?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have anything that I need to talk to.
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Director.
if you can spare us 5 minutes, we just wanted to give you an update on potholes. We know that's very topical.
Oh, we love a good pothole.
So
Are we inviting anybody in?
Yes, I'm inviting.
Yep.
They invited you. So I've got Stephen Bell here, the manager of road construction.
So we'll do this and then we'll go to Councillor Heremeyer's general business
Oh,
item.
sorry. No, yeah.
Good afternoon, councillors. I won't keep you that long, but this is a riveting subject. I know you're all eager to hear what I have to present, so obviously Darryl's was only the foray to this one. So a bit of information. Obviously this has come up from Councillor Heremeyer. So over the last 12 months, RCM has processed over 15,000 potholes. You'll be pleased to note that only 100 of those are outstanding. Since January of this year, we've had around 7,600 potholes that have been maintained. The biggest spike in potholes was in May, where we received about 2,200 pothole requests. Just for the divisional councillors, of the total potholes for the financial year, 31% of those were in Division 9. I think Councillor Bannon may go with a shovel and dig holes in his roads just to force us to go out there, I don't know, but 31% in Division 9. 13% in Division 11 and 10% in Division 7. So there's a very good spread in the rural areas generally. Just some information on team configuration. So we currently run 3 trucks. We have 3 crews. They're called Flowcons. We have 1 supervisor, 3 trucks, and those trucks are 2-person trucks. They were purchased in 2021. Over 4-tonne capacity. They can either carry hot asphalt or cold mix. This question has come about as a result of the potential for looking into contracting out that service, as I understand. We are currently looking at that as an option. We're looking at the use of a jet patcher, which is a more automated type of equipment. It's also something that we feel might help us. Because of the road network and we have so much traffic on our roads, it's actually quite dangerous for our guys to step out on the roads. And we're also struggling between the peak travel times between the morning and AM peaks, morning and PM peaks. So we're hoping that this might alleviate that. So we'll come back with that. We're also looking at some rapid response teams too to do some more night work. Just in terms of potholes, it's about 630,000 per year that's allocated towards pothole maintenance and 260,000 that's allocated towards ES brakes. Just some other issues. There has been some questions raised as to why we don't always fix the road up, and I thought I might just touch on that briefly. As you would be aware, in February, March this year and also in May, we had a severe flood event. That caused a significant amount of deterioration of the road network, a lot of potholes, a lot of pavement deformities. As a consequence of that, RCM set up a temporary structure and some teams to actually go out and pick up the data in terms of the damage to our network, and we're currently in negotiations with the QRA, the Queensland Reconstruction Authority, about getting some flood damage funding to repair those roads. Now, one of the requirements of that is that we can't go in there and repair the road without the QA actually approving those works. If we do that, then we run the risk of actually losing the funding. So, whilst it may appear that some of the roads aren't being repaired as quickly as what you may like, there is a reason why that is the case, because if we happen to go in there, then we may run the risk of losing the money. To date, that repair bill's around the $10 million mark, but it's likely to be higher than that once we go out to contract to get the works fixed. There are also other issues in regards to the statement of intents. So you would be aware that Council has a number of statement of intents. I'm not sure of the number precisely, but there was statement of intents for rehab, local roads and so forth. And some of those statement of intents will cover the roads that have been damaged. So what we don't want to do is go in there and fix up a road only to come back in 6-12 months' time to rebuild the road anyway. It's just not an efficient use of funding. So with that, I'll probably leave it at that. That's probably enough given the time. But if there's any questions, happy to take that. Thank you.
Oh, there's some questions. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you very much for those statistics. It's a lot of potholes. And I think one of the 100 is in Division 1. I know that because it hasn't been repaired. I saw it on the way here. I'm just curious though, if one, you can send the stats for each division, and two, the flood, the 10 million flood repair, is that only for roads that have water over them? Or, okay, because I've reported a number of roads that have road failures rather than they had water over them, obviously, but they had road failures as a result of so much rain. Are they the roads that are possibly eligible?
There is, through you, Madam Mayor, Chair, I should say. No, there is set criteria that Council has to comply with in terms of the QRA funding. So the road does need to be impacted by flood water.
Right.
It's different to stormwater.
Right.
So in the cases that you're talking about, I'd be happy to get back to you and
Yep.
tell you or advise you what roads in your area
Yes.
have been impacted and are subject to the QRA funding. But there is certain criteria that we need to abide by.
And the final question, if that's okay through the chair, is about the rapid response team that you mentioned. I know Brisbane City Council do that. Sometimes they repair our roads even on their boundary. So is that the model that you're thinking of for that?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's exactly the model that we're looking at. We're looking at responding to requests, any request really. It could be a sign down, it could be potholes, it could be anything. But the crews go out, they fix it, they're available during the night. So it's more of a proactive approach to maintenance rather than being reactive.
It could even be a tree over a road or something like that even, that they come and...
Through you, Madam Chair, it could be, but normally we engage another branch to cut down trees. But yes, we would certainly be involved in that.
Just a quick one from me, Mr Bell. So in one of my local streets, Council came along after the heavy rains had finished and they cut holes that were about the size of a bread and butter plate in the roads. And then they left them uncovered for about 2 weeks and then they came and filled them in. When they came to fill them in, they actually bypassed a number of road breakages and potholes on the way in. So just out of curiosity, do council officers, when they're going around the city, see one, slap some stuff in and then move on? Or is it a case of sometimes it's just reportables that they actually repair?
Through you, Madam Chair, with this whole circular in size, well then I would dare say they're more related to a geotechnical investigation that perhaps the Road Infrastructure Planning branch are doing. Normally what they do is they then, once that investigation has been completed, they then engage RCM to come along and fill them. I would like to think that our crews, as they're going down a road, proactively fill potholes, but I wouldn't be confident in that.
Mr Mayor?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I was wondering if we could get that report sent to all of us, and also, is it worthwhile doing a media response to this, because Facebook is absolutely inundated with complaints about potholes and stuff. I was wondering whether we make that available or not, in a written form, obviously, not in a report form.
I think if the manager is prepared to work with the media branch on it, then
Well,
yeah.
would like that to be available if we could.
Thanks. No other questions on that? Thank you very much, Mr Bell. General business. Councillor Heremiah, you had some general business? Hang on. Oh, before we move into general business, Mr Director, can we clarify something with you?
Sorry, councillors, we were just checking that previous recommendation that had gone up on item 5.1, and through the quick change of the amended document. So if I could just have it, our original recommendation had that council received the report, and so just wanted to read that.
No, the original.
Jim. But that's okay. I just want to be. That's the original motion, is it?
That's the amended motion.
That's the amended motion. That's okay. I'm okay with that.
The only amendment to the original recommendation is that it refers to the tabled.
Yeah, so we included that tabling of that extra document in that number 1. So that's okay.
So you're happy with the original
Yeah, that's
one?
fine.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the one up there is fine. Okay.
So we don't need to move...
No, don't have to move anything else.
Councillor Heremiah, you've got some general business today?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a general business motion for consideration today, and it's about road closures and the current process associated with road closures. In my division, there's quite substantial population growth going on, and that means that many roads are being closed down. And Councillor Bannon just asked me how much population growth is going on in Division 8. I've just got the new census data for Parkridge in front of me today. And in 2016, the population of Parkridge was 2,503 residents. And in 2021, the population of Parkridge is 8,455 residents. So that's a 237% increase, which is substantial. And those new developments that are going in and the different roads and all the different growth going on means that roads are sometimes closed down. In fact, half of Parkridge Road is closed down as we speak. So my general business motion is about looking at the current process in our city for road closures and identifying if there's any areas for improvement, especially when it comes to communication with elected members such as councillors and also the residents. So I'll read out the general business motion: that the Director of Road and Water Infrastructure be requested to present a report to a future City Infrastructure Committee meeting that reviews the current process for road closures and identifies areas of improvement, such as improving communication with elected members and residents. Madam Chair, I'd like to move that motion when appropriate.
Thanks very much. Any other councillors want to speak on this? Councillor Bannon. Different issue, pardon me. Do any councillors want to speak on this motion? Do I have a seconder for the motion? Mayor Power, all those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Councillor Bannon, your general business item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I could probably easily do this outside, but you're here. Councillor Heremiah just reminded me that half of Parkridge Road's closed. It's Chambers Flat Road construction is starting soon. Our diversion for the detour for that is on the Parkridge Road. So we're going to have half of Chambers Flat Road shut, diverting people on the Parkridge Road when it's got roadworks as well.
I'll take that on board and have a look into that. Yep. It's part of the bigger diversion that we actually have for that. The smaller diversion is actually via Kingsway, but I'll have a look at it. Yep.
Well, Carter Road wasn't being a diversion because that's for local traffic only. We're actually avoiding people using Carter Road as a diversion. That was a big point. But I'm going to get slayed if I'm moving people to Parkridge Road, and that's to close as well. But thank you, for Councillor Heremiah, for reminding me.
I'll certainly take that on board to have a look at it and look at the concurrency of the timing between the two. Yep.
From little things, big things grow. Does anyone else have any general business? There being none, I move that we close the meeting at 12:27 p.m. Thank you very much for your attendance and your participation.